which could ostensibly change their life outcome. He believed strongly in the power of the ballot. They needed to be literate. So for him, becoming literate wasn't just, it took on an extra added level of importance, okay? Which we take for granted. There was a military coup in 1964, and then he was exiled from Brazil during that time. He went to live, I forget which country he went to live in, South America. At the same time, as Freire was writing in his region, in Latin America, a new type of approach of liberation theology began to emerge, and this was linked to religion. Freire himself wasn't particularly religious, but this was just setting the context that similar thoughts were being shared. This is a definition of pedagogy, taken very literally, the method and practice of teaching, especially as an academic subject or a theoretical concept, and obviously the definition of oppressed, somebody or something that's subject to harsh and authoritarian treatment. All right, so in Pedagogy of the Oppressed, you can of course read the entire book, but I only asked you to read chapter 2. Why did I ask you to read chapter 2? Because to me, chapter 2 explains, I'm skipping through this because I'm not going through chapter 1. Freire believed that the world is made up of oppressors and the oppressed, the haves, the have-nots, and that both need to work together in order for society to advance. You can't be an oppressor without having an oppressed, and you can't be oppressed without an oppressor. You see that? There's an interrelationship. Okay? And for him, true liberation is not simply a reversal of those roles, but a redefinition. Okay, there has to be social interaction between the two groups. All right, let's get to chapter 2. He says, when the oppressors and the oppressed commit to understand that they're at odds and can agree to work together, then you're moving to the process of what he calls permanent liberation. You may be saying, what is she doing with this? Why are we talking about this in relation to the schooling system? He took his theoretical and philosophical ideas and he said, look, I'm looking at the way we typically educate our children, and it's not liberational at all, but it could be. It has the potential to be. And he said, unfortunately, the symbol that he came up with to explain the system of education, speaking specifically about Brazil, but which had applications to other countries, particularly in the West, is the banking model of education, right? In this banking model, students are considered empty bank accounts and the teacher is a depositor. What do you think he means by that? Ashley, loudly.
The teacher is the one who knows everything, that they are tell students what they should think, what they should write, think, say.
Right, so the teacher is the font of all knowledge, and the students are just there to gather that knowledge from the teacher. It's a one-way transmission of information. So it assumes that the students are passive and unquestioning and made to fit into the world as it is, meaning to accept their status in life. The teachers are the ones that have complete control. So for Freire, he had a lot of problems with that. He felt ultimately that it killed creativity and it supported rote memorization as opposed to real education. It began from an inaccurate premise that believed that students come to school without any background knowledge or any experiences that they can use to build their future knowledge. It relied on a model that involved no interaction, no dialogue, no questioning, and no inquiring, no inquiry. Right? That's what this basically says, that the students receive the information, they file it, just like the bank receives the money, it files a record of the receipt, and it stores it. Okay? So again, the banking model supports, in his explanation, no interaction, no dialogue, no questioning, no inquiry. The students are passive. They're receptors and adapters instead of innovators. And that's how they then will go out into the world. In this model of education, the individual is seen more as a spectator and not a recreator of the world. So what would be the role of the teacher in this model? To regulate the way the world enters into the mind of the students, to fill the students, and notice that's in quotation marks, by making deposits of information, and to adapt students into the world the way it is to make them fit in. This is very functionalist, right? See that? And that in that model, that's what it really meant to be educated. His ideas were different. Why did he think the banking model was failing? In his words, the teacher's thinking should only be authenticated by the student's thinking. Authentic thinking that's concerned about reality cannot take place in isolation, but only through communication. So what theory is he now moving into from functionalism? Can anybody tell me?
Interaction.
Who said?
Interaction.
Interactionism. That's right. Thank you. Okay. He gives further examples. In a banking model, I don't want to confuse with this. So let's just go from that point. That interaction is important, communication is important, and man cannot exist in the world without interaction. Do you agree or disagree?
Because I'm
Loudly, Dina, loudly.
Good evening, everyone. When I read that, that caught me because I'm saying this is actually true. I mean, how can you identify the world if you're not really there in the world? So, when it said that because I'm based on it, asking, well, if there's not a world, how can you identify that? If you're not conscious or you're not in the world, how can you identify that there's a world? There's nobody living in the world, only animals, plants, and the natural stuff. Well, is there anyone to identify the world?
But also there wouldn't be any scope for problem posing education. So education that allows for innovation and change. So all these new contraptions, all the new contraptions that we walk around with, all the technology that we have, if people hadn't said, you know what, this is a problem and we want to try and solve it, the solutions wouldn't have come. If you just accepted everything as it is, then things don't change. So he believed a lot in the concept that education has to move along with, that change is a constant. And education has to prepare students for that, and creativity and critical thinking are integral life skills, and that schools should be instilling those in their students. So, in a problem-posing model, you would recognize relationships between people. It would encourage discovery and creativity, and eventually that might lead. You can't read this because of the colors. It leads to transformation of the self. And in his words, the practice of freedom. That's what he means by freedom. Self-transformation is one form. Self-actualization is another way of phrasing it, which is the term that Bell Hooks uses. Right? A greater awareness of self. And that education should help human beings to deal with problems in their own world. Okay. That's the end of this. So, what would the type of educator that Freire is talking about look like? He would call them a liberating educator. That's what it says in the orange. These are some pictures of random people. They don't look like educators to you. I love these presents. That the teacher should also be a student among students. That the teacher should be learning from the interaction with the students. And by this, he's not saying the teacher should cede all power to students and that they give up authority in the classroom. Nothing is so black or white. What he's talking about is that in this case, the teacher, a lot of people go into teaching because they themselves like learning and they want to be continual students and to continually learn and engage their mind. So that's what he's talking about. This is the teacher who trusts their students and in their creative power, and in that sense, a relationship is built and feels that they can share their ideas with the student or their problems. So if the student raises a question the teacher cannot answer, the teacher doesn't make up an answer. The teacher admits, I don't know the answer to that, but we can find it out together. So a liberating educator would abandon the goal of deposit making and instead seek to create people that ask questions and are innovative. This is a video, you're not going to be able to hear it, so what I'm going to do is send you the link. This is him shortly before he died. That's the end of it. So, that's Paolo, that's a little taste of him. I can't really explain to you how influential he has become since the 1970s. Have any of you heard of him before? If you have heard of him before, can you raise your hand, please? Nobody. One person. Really? Can you share what you've heard? That's in Dominica.
Yes, I think when we were discussing the liberation theology in South America, I think one of the conferences he gave he talked on that same idea of education as liberation. So I do remember there was this Catholic, and during the 1970s, 1980s, we had this revival in South America with his liberation theology. And he was part of that. And that whole basic was that religion, his religion, and how he saw the world as it came about. So I have heard about him, but I've never really paid any attention.
Okay.
But he was part of that.
Right.
Religion.
Yeah, he's considered in education circles to be the father of critical pedagogy. Right? Why is there a glare? Can I do anything with that? Let me see if the light helps. Yes, could you? Thank you. I was thinking the black and white. No, that's worse. Okay, turn it back off. Turn it back off. It's in the light from the projector. Yeah, can't do anything with it. Darker. Well, if I could, I don't know. Is that better?
No, it's not better.
Can you see that now? Is that better?
No.
Yes, no, raise your hand if it's better.
Yes.
Bermuda, what about you? Bermuda? Yes, better. Okay, thank you. I just need to know. All right, you can see that now. Let's go. Can't see that. All right. So he's the father of critical pedagogy, which is an approach that attempts to help students question and challenge oppression. As I told you, I'll be sending this to you, so just listen. You all in the other islands, you can just close your eyes and listen because there's no more images, it's just words now. I'm just going to recap some of the main points of the Prezi, all right? I was really using the Prezi just to give you, let you see pictures actually, and to start putting some of the ideas in your head. All right, so remember his experience in teaching the rural farmers in Brazil who were being oppressed, literally oppressed, not figuratively oppressed, but literally oppressed, okay? And one of the reasons they were being oppressed was because they couldn't vote, because they couldn't read, they couldn't write, they weren't considered literate. So he made it his mission to help them learn to read and write. And so for him, the concept of literacy took on this added meaning and helped him to formulate his ideology, which the name was later given of critical pedagogy, right? He believed that education, beginning with reading and writing, the very basics, helps students begin to achieve what's called critical consciousness, which is like critical thinking, but a little bit deeper because it adds critical thinking plus self-awareness. Okay? In Portuguese, the word for this is conscientizar, which I don't know if that's pronounced correctly, but that's how it sounds. And the definition is, students must develop a critical awareness so that they can take action against oppressive elements of reality. The realization of one's consciousness. It was important for students to learn to read the word, he used this phrase, to read the word and the world. So not only reading the word on paper, but having a better ability to read their world around them. To understand what's happening, to make sense of what's happening, and to see how they can try to change it if they want to. This is another person's definition of it. Conscientization is an ongoing process by which a learner moves towards critical consciousness, which is the heart of liberatory education. So freeing your own ideas, freeing your own thoughts, and using those ideas and thoughts to possibly affect your place in the world. It means breaking through prevailing ideas or mythologies to reach new levels of awareness. Again, remember, he was speaking specifically to people who were in an oppressed state. So he wanted them to move from being an object of the will of others to being a self-determining subject. So moving from being the object of the will of others to a self-determining subject. For him, that began with reading and writing, but it goes way beyond that. In his writing, he speaks about the concept of praxis. He gives the name to this process of self-transformation, greater self-awareness, the name of praxis, which is the power and the know-how to take action against oppression. So you can't do that unless you're at peace with yourself, you understand who you are, and you have an understanding of the situation in which you're living and where you want that situation to go. So for him, praxis involves a cycle of these things. There's an idea or a theory, you apply it, you evaluate it, you reflect on it, and then you might have a revised idea or a new theory. Get that? Scientists do this with experiments. This is basically what scientists do with experiments, and he's kind of borrowing that lingo. For him, in order to have any real transformation at a macro level, at the level of the society, you have to have individual praxis. Individuals are going through that cycle, and then that praxis has to become collective. It's not enough for me to do it. That's not going to transform the society. Alyssa has to do it. Jason has to do it. Vanessa has to do it. Rosaline has to do it. Groups of people have to be involved in this practice. Critical pedagogy's focus was on social class originally, but it has since spawned additional theories that have affected education. We're not really going to be talking about any of those in great detail, but I've listed some here. The first one that comes up is the concept of postmodernism, post-colonial theories, anti-racist theories, feminist theories, and they've shifted the concept of critical pedagogy, which began with a focus only on social class, to discuss other ways in which people might be oppressed as a result of their race, their gender, their sexual preference, their age, their ethnicity. This ideology is not without criticisms. Some of the criticisms, let me see if you can think what some of the criticisms might be. Anybody feel like they want to share one of the criticisms that it might lend itself to? Let's see if there's thinking. Have on a thinking face. Ashley?
That perhaps schools are not placed for this kind of discussion.
Yeah, so that one of the criticisms might be, this is really not what schools are about. Schools are about transmitting X knowledge that allows people to go and get jobs, and this is really not the role of the teacher, right? Another criticism is that teachers can use their role and their position of authority to bias the class towards any position. That position might be against whatever the status quo is, and they can misabuse their authority. Okay? That's one criticism. Another criticism is that teachers who follow this ideology can selectively pick people to discuss people in certain ways. So whereas you might find teachers regularly criticizing Thomas Jefferson, you would rarely find people criticizing Martin Luther King. These are not my examples, these are examples from different people. But you get that idea, right? And there's certain people you just don't criticize. You don't criticize Gandhi, right? And there are other people that are more open to criticism. And that instead of presenting both sides of a story, the teacher might just present one. Another criticism is that, his whole ideology evolved from an actual struggle, a real struggle of rural Brazilian farmers to ameliorate their life condition. And that the people in classrooms now that are supposedly embracing this liberationist theology have never really had to struggle. They never participated in the civil rights movement in the 1960s. They themselves have never been prejudiced against. And so they can't really teach from that perspective because they have not experienced it. These are potential criticisms. Another criticism is that it's too esoteric, it's too intellectual, and so that the practical level of applying it gets lost. Another criticism is that it can easily lend itself to perpetuating conspiracy theories. Now, for the purposes of this class, what I'm interested in, you understanding and taking away from Freire, and I encourage you to read the whole book if you're interested in liberation theology, in the concept of education as a practice of freedom, an esoteric freedom or freedom of the mind, as well as practical freedom. But for this class, I want you to think very carefully about the banking concept of education, the characteristics of that, and how that can be and should be reversed, and why it should be reversed. I'm interested in the banking concept of education. Why? Because I think this is what happens in many of our classrooms. Do you disagree or agree with that?
I agree.
Alyssa, go ahead, loudly.
I agree, but I also think that sometimes it becomes necessary because students come to class as blank slates and are not as enthusiastic about learning, and so they don't come with input. They come to receive. So they come to be passive learners. They don't come to actually participate in class. I think sometimes it just happens that the teacher ends up giving all the knowledge because students don't challenge, don't question. They just don't. Maybe they're not interested. Maybe they don't trust themselves. Whatever it is.
Right. It could be that they're not interested, that they've never been asked. Right. So when I did my dissertation a long time ago now, in my youth, it looked at the role of museums in Jamaica as an example of an informal education option, a type of education that takes place outside the classroom but can support what's going on within the classroom, and how museums and that kind of field trip experience can help to build a sense of individual and national identity. Okay, so I interviewed children in urban schools, in rural schools, and in semi-urban schools. I interviewed their teachers. I interviewed policymakers. I interviewed parents. I interviewed the museum people. I followed children, certain groups of children, on their visit to an actual museum that was near them. Different types of museums were near the different schools. Jamaica actually has like about 25 museums or more. So that wasn't as difficult as one might think. I then went back to the children and asked them, in some cases, the day that they visited, in some cases a week later, in some cases 3 months or 6 months later, to see if their memories, the depth of their memories would have changed at all. And I asked the children to draw, a certain group of children to draw what they remembered and to explain to me why they thought they remembered it. And I encountered a lot of trouble with the children because they were not used to being asked why they did something. So it took quite quite some time for me to explain to them that there was no right or wrong answer in what I was asking them. These were young children, they were 10 and 11. I just wanted to know what they thought and why. And once they got that, they had quite a lot to say. But they were hesitant at first because they weren't used to being asked why. Instead, when they went on the trips, they often had an exercise book with them, and they were asked to write down things as they went through the space. Things like the title of the painting, the year that the painting was made, the artist, what did the painting look like? It was a horse. It looked like a horse. These weren't abstract paintings, so it wasn't even that level of inquiry. And what I asked them to tell me what kind of exhibits they would like to see in Jamaican museums. They actually, some of them said the typical thing that you would expect, which were like the exhibitions that they themselves had seen, exhibitions on Jamaican history, or on Jamaican art, or on Jamaican music. But a good percentage of them actually raised social issues and said they would like to see exhibitions on relationships. They didn't say it in these words, but they talked about relationships between their parents and alluded to issues of domestic violence, which I had to report to their teachers and so on, because that was above my scale, but that was interesting that they raised those issues. So some of them raised social issues, and yet they had never been to a museum exhibition that did that. These were not children who had traveled to other countries and gone to major museums that were doing that. And at that time in Jamaica, the exhibitions were not bringing to the fore any social issue at all. It was basic. These are the seminal Jamaican artists. This is an exhibition on a particular period in Jamaican history. It wasn't attacking social issues. So for an 11 and 12-year-old child to be able to tell me that was very important, and to tell me that they thought that a museum could do a good job of explaining that and making you feel that you were learning more about it and come up with your own ideas was very important and was a big finding in my research. And I say all of that to say that sometimes it isn't that the children come. That child that told me about social issues and she drew an image, which was disturbing, clearly was coming to the classroom with issues that might have affected how she was acting in class or not acting in class, speaking or not speaking. And if the teacher had not found a way to connect with that child to find out why she wasn't sharing her experiences or connecting with the lessons, then that child would have just gone by the wayside. Venus.
It's almost like the case with that movie with Mrs. Grill, what she did with the journal. And noting when she went through them and she saw, the socioeconomic background, all of those mishaps and what happened to that student. So, she tried and found that gave her like a passage. She found out, okay, like she's asking herself, how can I connect with them? And so she found all sorts of different ways.
Yeah, but Alyssa raises an interesting point. I mean, in the other islands, I would like to hear what you think about the model of education that you see in your schools, or maybe this is a much easier way to teach. The banking concept is an easier way to teach. Why? Because the teacher's teaching, the students are just receiving, there's no question, there's no answer, there's a right answer, there's a wrong answer. The teacher knows everything, the student is just supposed to follow along. This is the teaching for rote memorization. There's no distraction with a question a student is asking that might throw the teacher off his or her lesson plan. This is an easier way to teach. The question is it the best way to teach? Is it the optimal way to teach? When you think back to the meanings of education that we started this class with, that we started discussing, and all that we've been discussing today. So can I hear from somebody who would volunteer in the other islands? Bermuda is totally dark. I guess that's to see the slides. I can't see anybody's faces. There they are. Okay, I'll start island by island. Dominica, is there anything you would like to share? What do you think about the banking concept? Does that happen in your schools? What do you think?
Okay, I think what comes to my mind is sometimes the student just wants everything to be taught to them. Like they come in and see they don't know nothing. And to me is they know something, but they always think they don't know nothing. So it can be a challenge that they want everything to be fed to them in class. So like critical thinking, the initiative of let me try to say something, sometimes it's very difficult because they just like, okay, teacher, tell us everything.
So that's true, but it's also, in some ways, it's easier for the student, isn't it? Just to sit there and listen and then memorize and just be tested on it. But will the student remember that 10 years later?
No, you won't.
No. So then comes the question of have they really learned anything?
Exactly. And I just want to add that even as my partner here, family here said, that some of the students, they just sit there and they, especially they want the teacher to give them like take notes.
Yeah.
And sometimes you, as a teacher, you probe them, you ask the probing questions, and they will say, I don't know, that kind of thing. What can the teacher do in cases like that?
And they come from the private school. They come with this is always that. If you ever thought that, you thought the first form student and you're taking a math concept and you're dealing with it in a different way. You know, I mean, in private school, you can't help your child because if you say, well, try it like this, because they will say, Miss did not say that, do it like that. So therefore, mommy, you're wrong.
That's true. I get that quite a lot. And you have to work with that. And the thing is, you want the students to be paying attention so that they can say, you know, Miss, couldn't we have done it this way? But not all teachers want to hear that. Some teachers will say, yes, you know, you could do it that way. I never thought about it that way, but you still get the same answer if it's a math problem, for example. And that's interesting that you took it from that angle. Was it faster for you to do it that way, or was it faster for you to do it the other way? You know, and then you have that kind of discussion instead of shooting down the child and saying, no, there's only one way to do it. You need to do it this way. That goes against the type of activities that when children are, or when you become an adult and you're put on the member of a team and you have to be working together and strategizing. If everybody looked at it the same way, then there would be no new ideas. Another island, Bermuda. You want to add anything to the conversation about banking concept?
I understand the concept, but I don't know how you teach it back.
I couldn't hear you. Can you say that again?
I understand the concept of the bank concept. I don't know how you do something different when you teach science. The maths can change really hard in market school. So I just want to get some of that example.
Yeah, remember, I mean, he's not talking about all subjects, each subject in specific. He's speaking generally. So obviously, if you're teaching about a heart, the way that the heart beats and functions, and what are the functions of the heart, those are facts. But he's also saying that you can ask children, or your students rather, to bring in their own experiences about the heart. If they've been reading about the heart, or if they had seen any hearts, you know, or I don't know, I'm making that up. I mean, for example, my children have seen in science class an actual goat's heart or a cow's heart or something. And so if they were in a class about the heart, they would say, but you know that the goat's heart was smaller than the cow's heart or whatever. And that would bring a different angle to the conversation, and you start to look at size and form. And he's saying that there should be a dialogue, that it shouldn't only be the teacher standing up and saying, all right, this is the heart, these are the facts about the heart, and that's the end of it. That's part of it, but that then there's a discussion that should take place so that the students can relate to it. Otherwise, they'll just memorize it, and then later on they won't remember it. I can tell you personally that has happened to me in the science classes that I took in high school. I took a lot of science classes in high school. I was very good. I was, you know, but I don't remember any of it now. because it wasn't applied to my life in any way. It was simply, this is what happens, this is the order in which it happens. When you run the experiment, this is going to happen first, this is going to happen second, this is going to happen third. You need to know the order in order to answer the question. And then I memorized it. And now when my son brings home work that I'm sure I did, I can't help him because I don't remember, I didn't understand it, I just memorized it. So I think that's what he's talking about, that it isn't that the teacher assumes that the students have nothing to contribute to the lesson. I don't know if that makes it any clearer to you.
I think he's raised wrong. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to St. Lucia.
My first year.
Yes, is that Bermuda?
Yes. Okay. I was wondering, are there like different degrees of creativity or learning? I thought that in order to do the degree, the brain has to be developed this very thing, and like the conclusion as a being on the everything that the brain has to be developed. Is that true? Or
I think again he's speaking generally, but even in that sense, he would have been very influenced by John Dewey, for example, who believed that students should learn by experience. So although they may not have the vocabulary to express or not be able to understand what they're doing, say if they're building with blocks, and they figure out without you telling them that if they put a lot of blocks one on top of the other and they don't have a solid base, it's going to topple. If you tell them that that's going to happen, then they won't learn that for themselves. But they'll figure it out eventually by experimenting. And then they'll realize that in order to have a stable building, you have to have a solid base. And that's a lesson that they may not be able to express that. But yes, you raise a good point, Jason. I mean, certainly there are different levels of complexity and discussion you can have as students get older. But that you should be encouraging that discussion from a young age. So in Jamaica, a good example of that is the vocabulary example that I think I may have used before in our sessions, where in the lower income, in the public schools, you don't often see, at least the ones that I have observed, you don't often see the teachers really exchanging in discussions with the children. What you see is, what color is this? What is this animal? What sound does the animal make? How many animals are there? What's the name of the animal, as opposed to asking the children to say, have you seen an animal like this? What kind of sound did he make? Can you tell me a story about the animal that you saw? Can you give me a word to describe the animal? Can you give me another word? Can you give me a word that is the same as that word? So it's a pretty cat. Can you give me another word for pretty? So that you're building that in the discussion. But that takes place in middle income and upper income schools more naturally. And so the children's vocabulary is much broader at a very young age. There's a study that was done and published in the New York Times. I can't remember the exact numbers. I should try to find that. And I mean, when you see the number of words that a low-income child has heard versus the number of words that a middle to upper-income child has heard by the age of 5 or something, there's a huge gap. And the study went on to look at how that would affect their ability to express their ideas and their ability to write, right, as they got older. And obviously there's a lot of work that's been done on the incredible potential we have as human beings to learn between birth to 3 to 5, because that's when the synapses in our brains are starting to form and link and mesh, and that never happens again at that same rate. Which is why they say that it's so much easier for young children to learn multiple languages. As opposed to, as we get older, it gets harder. You want to add something, Jimmy?
Well, an experience that I've had, and it's something that I'll never forget, because it was a case of spelling bee in school where, I was in primary school, so I was like at age 10, wanting to get into spelling bee competition. Now, when for the school, when we're doing the competition for the school, so that whichever student would get first place would go along.
Sorry, I should say, in Jamaica, the spelling bee is a big deal.
Right, I don't know if it is in the other islands. And what happened to me was I was like the fifth student, because once you get a word incorrect, you would drop out. And so now I was the fifth student, and when I went there, I was like, they gave me the word base to spell. You know, they kept on telling us, and we're always asking the definition. Right now, I just couldn't spell yeah. And they were like, no, incorrect. Words that are pronounced the same, but and that's when I was like, oh, what's the definition? Like, I got so bad at words, and I can't find things, and I just slowed myself down with writing and started saying I'm not good at writing and I hate writing, and I was saying, oh boy, I'm just bad at words. And when that happens to me, and I came for a place wanting to get into the spelling bee, I'm always like, you're not bad at words, you just didn't answer the definition. Okay, so you see from then, I'm always very, sometimes they're like, yes, that's the meaning of the word, but I realized I'll just go and I'll go on dictionary.com, check the meaning of things, right? But so really, so that's just a greater level of awareness. Yeah. He also, Freire would have been influenced by the work of Lev Vygotsky, who was a Russian educator. Do any of you know of him? If you study anything about the psychology of learning, Vygotsky, I don't know how it's pronounced. I pronounce it Vygotsky. It could be Vygotsky. And he came up with the concept of scaffolding, where you have the image in your mind of a building that has scaffolding around it. Right, that's the image. And so a student comes in at a certain level, and the teacher helps to move them to another level. And that distance, by scaffolding them, by supporting them, the image again is the building with the scaffolding around it. And that distance from where the student enters and where the student leaves, or leaves with a particular topic, it could be during the course of the year, is called the student's zone of proximal development. That's the basic tenets of Vygotsky's theory. That the teacher as a facilitator is scaffolding the learning by recognizing what the student brings, trying to get the student to engage, and then building on it to get the points across that the curriculum wants to have made. That's really what that slide says. For Freire and Dewey and Vygotsky, learning involves the active construction of knowledge through an engagement with ideas in meaningful context. For Freire, this was ideas based in real issues, real life issues, and incorporating students' own experiences, enabling them to build upon the knowledge that they already have. Okay, I'm not going there yet. So don't worry about that slide. So for me, for the purposes of this class, Mrs. G, or Miss G, was a good example of somebody who eventually moved to the scaffolding, right? She moved to experiential learning. When she took them out to the museum, she had them participating in activities to bring the speaker to the school. She had them relating literature to their real life situations and allowed them to write about their real life situations in their journals and link back to the literature. The movie comes up again and again in terms of the themes. And she believed in them being active, so she had them moving around the classroom. She didn't have them sitting down at their desks all the time. So she embraced a lot of that concept. And for her, in many ways, Freire would probably have considered her to be a liberationist teacher, because she, by doing what she did with those students, she gave them an opportunity to go on to college, which they otherwise would not have had. And for many of them, they were the first in their families to do that. And that is how you can eventually break the cycle of poverty. And that's the power of that one teacher. Okay, so that's, for me, I'm interested in chapter 2 for you to understand the banking concept and to understand ways that the banking concept can be replaced. So what are the ways that a teacher who negates the banking concept is interested in experiential learning
is interested in critical pedagogy would teach. That's the takeaway for you for this class for chapter 2. Okay, and an awareness of what, hello Courtney, an awareness of what critical pedagogy is, the concept of critical consciousness, about this idea of education being a method of freedom in terms of freedom of thought, freedom of mind. Baby, you want to ask something?
Good afternoon again. I was thinking the basic, one of the things that it teaches to get the students involved, get everybody involved rather than, one-way flow.
Yeah, and when you, next week, I will be here and you'll have Dr. Mondo will be here teaching, speaking about the arts in education and about multiple intelligences, which is another theory that looks at ways to involve the students by targeting and incorporating, rather, the different ways people might learn into your teaching. So the arts, for example, there's been multiple studies that say that children that are exposed to music do better in math. Right? I'm not making that up.
Yeah.
That's why you see pregnant mothers will play music for their children in the womb, right? And yeah, they read to the babies in the womb so that they'll not only hear the sound of their voice and be able to bond with the sound of their voice, but there's this belief that they begin to hear the words, right? So multiple intelligences will look at seven core intelligences, which Howard Gardner, who came up with that theory, has expanded to, I think, 9 now. So Dr. Mondo will talk about that. But the premise is getting the learner involved. That teaching and learning is not a one-way activity, but it is a relationship that involves a dialogue. Okay? So the next author that we read for today was Bell Hooks, and she's still alive. She was born in 1952. She is an African-American feminist social activist. She's written a number of books, including a few children's books. She writes mainstream articles in the mainstream media. She writes scholarly articles. I believe she teaches at Columbia. I'm not sure if she still teaches there. She's from Kentucky. So she would have grown up during the 1960s. So she would have been a victim herself of racial oppression and segregation. In the article that I asked you to read, she was profoundly influenced by Freire, and is often linked to him. She talks about the importance now for a teacher, for the teacher being engaged, not just engaged with the curriculum or the subject matter. Some teachers just love their subject and they just get lost in their subject. I had a math teacher in high school like that. He just loved math, and he would just get himself so consumed by whatever it was he was doing. He was more interested in the math that was taking place on the board than whether or not the students were following what was going on. I mean, his enthusiasm was infectious, but some of them in the back of the class could have cared less, right? And he didn't really make any attempt to go to the back of the class and engage them, because in his opinion, if they didn't he wasn't going to be bothered with that. Only the ones that were interested were the ones that he was going to deal with. So in her chapter, when she writes about engaged pedagogy, she's saying that in order to really educate as a practice of freedom, the teacher has to be engaged and the learner has to be engaged. And that engagement isn't superficial. That engagement means that you have to be reflective of your practice on a regular basis. You have to be able to be willing to do what you're asking your students to do. So if you're asking your students to write an essay, she is, obviously she's in the humanities. If you're asking your students to write something about an experience that they had, then you as a teacher should be willing to write. If you're asking them to share in a group, you as a teacher should be willing to share your writing. So she talks about that level of connection that can happen in a classroom when both the teacher and the student are engaged. And she gives a few examples from her own experience with her students. And sometimes she's teaching at the tertiary level. I should explain that. I think you have to pick that up from the article. She's saying that when that happens, one of the reasons she loves teaching is that she's constantly able to keep not redefining herself, but it causes her to keep rethinking her own ideas and her own place in the world. And the phrase she uses is self-actualization. That because she's challenging herself and she's being challenged by her students, she's then pushing herself to be all that she can be. Can't remember what marketing campaign uses that phrase, be all that you can be. But that's really what she's talking about. Self-actualization. It's a Nike. The army. The army. Thank you. Got that. Be all that you can be. Right. And she's saying that in the classroom, this is what gives her a rush. This is what keeps her interested. That she's engaged in her students' lives, her students are engaged in her life, that they are a part of her life. She's not showing up just to do the job and collect a paycheck. All right, let's go back. Did any of you read the article? I couldn't get the link. Even the second one that I sent?
I didn't. I would know first.
It's not a very long. See, I'm not allowed to scan it and send it to you. There's copyright issues with that. So
it's earlier because on my phone I was able to download the prayer one, as it was. But then now when I'm trying to access just to have it in front of the phone. Both.
That is strange. I don't know. I mean, I've used these links before and they worked in July. I mean, they worked. I don't know why they drop it and they don't work. All right. She says that, she acknowledges that she's a lifelong learner and that she's committed to continuing her own education, and that one of the reasons why she chose to go into academia is because it would enable her to quench that thirst, to always be learning. I'm not so sure that many of our teachers go into teaching for that reason, but I believe some do. Okay? She says that if the teacher is not willing to attempt to make that kind of connection, to achieve that level of engagement, then the empowerment won't happen. Neither the empowerment of the student nor the empowerment of the teacher. What do you think about that? Does that seem far-fetched to you? Anybody can start speaking. I have to call people by name. Does that seem a fair premise? That to be engaged, the empowerment that you give that students will get and that teachers will get won't happen unless there's a level of engagement. That sounds fair. Otherwise, she's saying you're really just going through the motion. I mean, she's not saying that you can do this every day, all day long. I mean, you're not all Mrs. G working 3 jobs and whatever. She's saying that, this is what teachers should be aiming to do, but understands that it won't happen every day of the week. She also says, that's really what she's talking about. She says that she ends this chapter saying that professors, remember she's writing about teachers like her at the tertiary level, who embrace the challenge of self-actualization will be better able to create pedagogical or teaching practices that engage students, providing them with ways of knowing that enhance their own capacity to live fully and deeply. So in her mind, what she's doing with her students is not good enough just to pass the class. What she's trying to instill in her students is the same level of learning, not necessarily with the same topics, but just the concept of learning and living fully and deeply, and that teachers can do that. And that is a special element of a teacher's role. Right, that whatever they do, they're going to be the best that they can be. right? And that they're going to remain interested. And the world was made up of those kinds of individuals. Think of what, how much richer in ideas the world might be. All right, the next article that I asked you to read, and whether you got it or not is another issue, is by Deborah Meyer, who's also still alive. She is also an American. She's a Jewish American, and she lives in New York City and teaches at NYU now. But she started off as an early childhood teacher, early childhood educator. She taught for many years. She's probably in her 70s or 80s. I don't want to age the poor woman, but she's probably in her 70s. And she has gone on to start schools, charter schools. She's considered to be the mother, so to speak, of the charter school movement. Do you know what charter schools are? No. Any of you ever heard of the charter school concept?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, it's not a public school, it's not a private school, it's kind of in between the two models, but they have some level of autonomy that public schools don't have. So in many states, New York is one, there are a number of charter schools. And one of the most famous is Central Park East, which is the one she started, which is on the Upper East Side in Spanish Harlem. Okay? And for her, she has developed certain ideas about teaching. One of them is that she really believes that students, she's talking about the primary and secondary level, not tertiary, that students should remain, especially young students, with the same teacher for at least 2 years. Why do you think she says that?
Probably for the same reason we all do, that it's a great way for the teacher and the student to build a relationship.
Right, because she says that critical to learning our students must feel safe, which you saw in the film, right? That they must get to know the teacher, trust the teacher, and that by the time you finish the first year, you just really have that level of trust, and then the student has to move and start all over again. And in the movie, again, those students stayed with her for 2 years,
right,
which they had to lobby for and all of that. But in her school at Central Park East, that's what happens. So she started that out. That was one of the tenets of what she was going to do. She had the students stay with the same teacher for 2 years. She encouraged team teaching. Why do you think she would encourage team teaching? When you have two teachers teaching together in the same class. Sorry, team teaching is when teachers teach as a team of 2 or more. It's more than the teacher-student ratio. It's that they can support each other and that they can bounce ideas off each other. So if you're team teaching, there's team planning that takes place, and then there's the team execution of the teaching. Right? And she believed that the teachers also planned better and worked better when they worked cooperatively together rather than individually in silos. A charter school has some authority over the way that they teach the curriculum, so she gave her teachers a lot of autonomy in how they would teach the material, which is not something you would get in the public system. So because of that, it was attractive to some teachers who saw teaching as a calling and not necessarily as just something to do to pass time, but as a calling, and something that they genuinely were interested in and that they genuinely wanted to do well. She believed that schools should be experiential and should function more like learning labs rather than, again, this is the influence of Freire and others, rather than sites for rote learning. So the 5 principles that she espoused, I told you safety, that the teachers must know the students, there must be a relationship, that the teacher should function as a coach. That's another way for saying the teacher is a facilitator, right? Or scaffolding the students' learning. That the lessons in the classroom should spark inquiry, so anything that's taught in the lesson plan, there should be an element that's requiring the students to think critically, to create something new, to design something to include sections for children and students to ask questions, and that there's a lot of social learning that goes on in the classroom for students learning how to get along with each other, with their peers and with the teacher, and that the lessons and the classroom should be so set up to facilitate that. So again, that's group learning, tables that where more than one person sits, not everybody facing in the same direction, looking at one person. Those are her 5 principles. Her classes are somewhat longer than the normal, so that the teachers can incorporate different teaching techniques that might appeal to different types of learners. The school itself, Central Park East, is quite small. The class sizes are small. And what happened in her case, and her model has been written about a lot, that the teachers felt empowered, the parents felt empowered, and the students felt empowered. They've studied students that have gone through Central Park East, and they started tracking how many of them would go on to tertiary education and where they would go. Again, many of them, when she started, being the first in their families to do so. Okay. That's the end of that. That's one of the articles. That's the Reinventing Teaching one. There were actually 2 articles that she wrote, and she herself has written many articles and a few books. And she now, she's an education advisor. She works with a group of other similar colleagues. Some are based at Brown, and they produce journals that are widely read in the U.S. on concepts of reinventing teaching or concepts of education reform. In fact, the articles that you read last week or the week before by Bill Bigelow and his colleague, those Linda Christensen, those came from the program at Brown, of which she works with them too. So she believes that schools are sites of power. Okay, that's another point. And she believes that, and communities, and the power comes from the community, and so teachers have great responsibility in what they choose to teach, how they teach it, how the hidden curriculum plays out, and their role in that, whether it's positively or negatively, and that curiosity is one of the things that's critical to human growth, and so schools should be labs of curiosity. There's a great, I can't show it to you, but I'll send you the link. She does a good talk where she explains some of these ideas. She tells a few jokes. But basically she's saying that just like in the first TEDx that I showed in the first class, Sir Ken Robinson was talking about how schools have not become these labs of creativity, and how the young children, had the idea with the paperclip, and that as they got older, they couldn't come up with as many ways to use the paperclip because their frame of reference became narrowed by what we know as reality, as opposed to being able to think more broadly or more outside the box. And said that schools, instead of being centers that are encouraging students to think creativity, to be curious, that it does the opposite, and it basically deadens the students. Why? If the teachers were engaged and in the environments that she's been trying to create, she tries to combat that, and also engender a sense of community among the teachers, the parents. She's very big on the parental involvement, and the students. She also questions the way that we group students. Why are we grouping students only by age, for example? Should we be able to group them by ability in some ways? And so she's experimented with doing that within her schools too. Are there any questions? So far?
I have a question.
Yes, Jason.
You mentioned in the first article that teachers have to teach interdisciplinary courses like literature and science and that.
Yeah.
I was just wondering how a teacher be prepared for that.
That's why she team teaches. That's what she means by team teaching. Because in many ways there's connections. Nothing happens in science without some kind of context behind it.
Right.
And then she also says, she makes a very interesting point where she wishes she could see a system where schools would function not only as sites for students during the day, but that in the after school hours, there would be activity health services, family counseling services, that the school would really become a pivotal role in the community and would be alive beyond the school day, beyond the time frame of just the school day. Imagine that. Imagine if schools did that. Schools were open after 2 o'clock and a different set of people came in now to offer family counseling for families who need it, special education assistance for students who need it, job counseling for parents who might be looking for jobs or needing to upgrade their skills. Some countries are trying this. The Canadians have a model where they're trying to do this in certain, I think they call them provinces in Canada, in certain provinces. Yeah, there are some schools who try to do that because the stronger the parent body, the stronger the economic power of the parents, the better the school is going to be because they then help support the school too. So that's what you would call a win-win. I mean, she stresses a lot the power of human relationships and believes that school is also a site where students learn how to function in the world socially, and that teachers have to build that into their teaching. Because if you can't help a student to learn how to connect, then that student is going to be at a disadvantage when he goes out into the world. So it's almost 5:30. Are there any questions? And if there aren't, then you can take a break, and when you come back, we'll move on to the case study that I'm going to introduce. Oh, thank you. Any questions on Deborah Meyer? Okay, hold on. There's one here. Elizabeth first.
About different factors, because you currently group by louder. In Jamaica, we currently group our students by ability,
But by age.
and also by age. But by age, by ability.
Some by tracking. By
track,
yes.
Right. And
She meant by ability, but without age. Yes.
okay. So the issue is we put students who are at different ability levels together, but then we expect those at level 1 to move through and complete all the same.
Level 1 being the highest
Level 1 being the lowest level. Yeah. To learn everything that those in level 10 have to learn. And then they do the same tests, the same, and so we evaluate them all the same. And no more than ever, I'm thinking that some students really should get different schooling in terms of they should learn different things.
You're saying that some should be more vocational track.
I think so.
But they already are.
In
In Jamaica they are. By and large.
not such a great extent because they still have to do math and English and IT and science. They still do all of those subjects. And there's not that strong an emphasis on subjects, even in the high school that technical.
Yeah, well, math and English are core subjects.
But
Those are core subjects because those are everywhere. So Alyssa's question is about ability grouping, and that she thinks that in Jamaica, in Jamaica, we have a system, we have a very track system, as you know, and I think you probably have similar such systems. And in the high school, when they get into high school, some students are on a more academic track, and some students are on a more vocational track. And there has actually been a lot of talk over the years of melding those tracks, or at least lessening the divide between the two tracks, so that all the students that go on an academic track will also have appreciation for the vocational track by having to take a vocational subject, and those that are on the vocational track already have to take some academic subjects, math, English, and I don't know, science, some sciences maybe. She's saying that for a teacher, it's very hard when you're grouping children of mixed abilities because you're always shortchanging somebody, whether it's the ones that are performing at the higher end academically or the ones that are performing at the lower end academically. And there, this could be a class in and of itself. But one of the issues in our system, certainly, which may be an issue in your system, is that at the entry to the system in the early childhood into primary, we have not done a very good job in the past of being able to identify children, screen the children using proper tools, valid tools, culturally relevant tools that would help us to identify children that might have learning challenges and take them out of the existing system to give them the extra support at that young age when some of those challenges can be leveled off and then they can go back into the mainstream system. So what we're doing is we're trying always at the back end instead of at the front end. And so we are trying now in Jamaica to implement a national screening system. One of the challenges we face is once we screen the children and we find, so we did this recently with age 4 children in the parish of Westmoreland, for example. And all the children that went to every early childhood institution in Westmoreland were screened. And out of the 1,700 children that were screened, 25% of those children have been referred for secondary diagnostic testing. Out of that 25%, which is what, a total of 17, like 400 children, 450 children, out of that 25%, perhaps another 25% is going to have to go on for additional assistance. And those, the balance might be able to go back in the system. Maybe they were falsely referred. But if we can put that in place at the beginning, and then we have trained people that can help the families, that can help the students at age 4 and 5, and when they get to age 8 and 9, you should not have, this is the theory, you should not have such discrepancies. But also, the flip side of that is that children need to be able to deal with and function in a world where sometimes I'm better at math and you're better at drawing. That's just how it is. And I have to have respect for your ability to draw, and you have to have respect for my ability to solve the math problem. And together, maybe we need to work together if you have to draw a design, but I give you the dimensions. I mean, this is what happens in real life. So I'm not so sure that I agree. Certainly it's easier to teach when the classes are homogeneous. It's easier because everybody's moving at the same pace or close to the same pace. It's not as interesting necessarily. Okay, go ahead.
I just said that we have students at a lower level, and there are students at a lower level academically, students at a higher level. At the end of the day, even though students at level 1 wanting the lowest level, they're all together in a class, they're all learning, and you put them together so you can cater for, the way they learn at their pace. But at the end of the day, they do the same exams and they are evaluated the same way that students who are at level 10, being the highest level, are evaluated. And so
but that's reality too. I mean, they then will matriculate onto something else. I mean, they may not go into tertiary level, they may go into vocational colleges, or they may find something else that interests them. I don't know. But then I think it frustrates them and it frustrates the teacher. Yeah, it frustrates them because I think maybe sometimes they're hitting a brick wall. Well, the other option is to think about the way that we assess. If we are only assessing in a certain way, so we're not doing portfolio-based learning, where you would include previous examples of writing, not only what you do on the test, but that you include different levels of, like what the SBA is supposed to do. At our CSEC level, we have this thing called the SBA, where you do a project. It's a project-based learning, which goes to the final grade. But if you just score them based on a test alone, some students will always test better than others. So if you can create an assessment framework that takes into account the different ways that children learn, and in the Howard Gardner frames of mind, he talks about that, right? So that you kind of try to lessen that gap. But the way our system is set up right now, the way our system is set up right now in Jamaica is it's very tested. So either you're going to conform to those tests or not. It depends on the class. It depends on the student. Because some students, they're not interested. They're just not interested. And things they come to school with some unidentified learning disabilities. Also, unless your assessor, not interested at all.
He wants to know. Lovely. One thing that I found, okay, I remember having a student. Yeah, right. It's a case of, and with us, with the source school, because, okay, for instance, in secondary schools, you do have maybe like in the first form, and that's the thing where it's not the same in every secondary school, but you have many secondary schools in Jamaica where they'll introduce certain different languages, they'll introduce the IT, they'll introduce home economics, they'll PE, they'll introduce economics at the level where you can study for 6 C's, but in some high schools they don't have that. Now, I know students where they're not very much into math, but they're so much into, PE and IT and visual arts. And I say, okay, and there was a student who I don't even know what I want to do to choose for 6 C's. I just asked her, what do you love in school? And she was there listening. I'm like, math and English, you're going to have to do, they're necessary. And she loves her cheerleading and all of that. And I'm like, you like PE? She's like, yeah, that's a subject, And school offers it. It was school offers it. That's the thing. And I even knew of another young man who he loved his football and all of that. But he was there saying, oh, they think I should study medicine. I'm like, who knows? You could be, I suppose you could be a physiotherapist for somewhere, So I think your point is something that I think teachers grapple with a lot. But you need to be able to draw the resources of the school or on the computer, try and figure out what's going on with those students. Obviously, not all schools offer all these extra subjects. Some offer a smaller number of subjects, and that's just the reality. Sorry, you had a question?
Yes.
Lovely.
Just something to add.
Lovely. Yes.
I don't think it's a matter of I disagree with Alex. I don't think it's a matter of the students not being interested. Maybe we have to find ways to get their interest in whatever subject we're teaching. I think the problem also lies within the system that we have, because if you look at GSAT, they are grouped according to how well they perform.
On that test for 2 days.
The same students who go to, say, like a St. Andrew High, and the same students who go to like a Greater Portmore High School, at the end of the day, they're still doing the same CSEC, right? And somehow the ones who got the 40s and the 50s and the 30s, who we think are not capable of learning, they still come out doing the same things and getting ones and getting twos, just like the students who have attended St. Andrew High School for girls. But those are the minority, Those are the minority.
That's unfortunately not it's true. The big picture doesn't have large numbers getting ones and twos, unfortunately. But it also has to do with the grade 6. There's a lot with the grade 6, that is an issue. But the other issue is that there's a perception of the high schools that certain high schools are going to produce that more high achieving individuals.
You also have to think about the factors that are also holding back those students. Look at Greater Portmore High School is a shift school. The students who are supposed to get more time in school are the ones who are coming from 8 to 12 and then from 12 to 5. The ones who are smarter, who probably would need a lot less attention, let me just say that, they're going to school from 8 a.m. until 2:30 p.m.
Yeah, the shift system.
The more qualified teachers are at the traditional high school. The least qualified teachers are at the non-traditional high school.
No, that's true. One of the big problem in Jamaica's secondary education system is the disparity in the quality of the offerings. And part of that has to do with the teacher training levels. Part of that has to do with the principal training situation. So the stronger the principal, the better the teachers, the more organized the school. The principal will come in there and get rid of teachers that are just showing up to collect a paycheck or not showing up at all in some cases to teach, which happens not only in Jamaica, in other places too. But we are, as yet, we face the same problem that most people that graduate. Teaching is not a highly sought after career. It's not something that people will say, oh, I want to be a teacher, and it's just not up there. If you surveyed a random sample of Jamaican youth or St. Lucian youth or Dominican youth, they probably wouldn't say they want to be teachers. I don't know what they would say in the other islands. I mean, in this country, they would say they want to be a musician, or they want to be an athlete, or they just want to make money.
whatever it is that they do, they want to make money. And so therefore teaching would not be on that list, right, in their minds, at least at that age, 15, 16. So one of the issues is in attracting people to the system to teach and retaining them. So right now in our system, to get into teacher training college, the requirements to get into teacher training college are very low, right? And that's because you want people to go into, you have to get people into the system, right? So that's another issue, and they've been considering changing those requirements, but they know that if they raise the requirements, they're going to have a drop-off.
But I know what they think they're going to lose, because if you are going to say, well, CX is only, hey, I couldn't get into UTech and I couldn't get into UA. I really don't want to teach, but let me go to a teacher.
That's how it goes. That's how it goes. Right. That's how it goes now. And the hope is that that will change, but that's how it is right now. And that's when you read, not next week, but the week after, about the Teach for America experiment, you'll see that that's actually the premise, that you would attract highly motivated, high achievers into the school system, even for a short time. And could that make a positive impact? And if yes, should we continue to do it? Hold on, does anybody in another island want to say anything? Because Jamaica is monopolizing it.
No, they touched on some very important points. I like the one that you said, okay, if they group students are qualified to quality. For example, A student in one group, B in another group, and C in another group. I think right there, there will certainly be a problem right there. But if you mix it, the C student can always learn from the A student, because sometimes they learn better from the peers than from the teacher. So if you put all of these ones together, there's no one level pressure to succeed. But if you always mix it, there'll always be one that chapter and so fast that they will explain better. So for that matter, not including them according to the ability of mixing them.
Yeah. And I mean, you can play with that, so sometimes you can group them according to abilities, and sometimes you can do mixed ability grouping. So it's not always working with the same children all the time, that the students are not always in the same groups all the time. Because there's a lot that the academic student can learn from the more vocational student too. Remember the whole social component. Davey, you wanted to add something before I put you on?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the whole political ramifications of this, because certainly in Jamaica, you don't want to go into teaching because it's not seen, it has no prestige, it offers nothing, it will offer nothing. You know, so if
that's not unique to Jamaica.
Right. So if the powers that be would recognize that the only resource is the human resource and put their money where the mouth is, maybe we could change it.
Well, some other countries, in Finland, for example, and in Singapore, it's different. So it's highly respected. There's a government, they're pretty well remunerated. You have to have a master's degree, like they've raised the bar. They didn't do it overnight, they did it strategically. So I mean, it can be done. Yeah, it can be done.
Like for one, I was always against the idea of the shift system, because I'm saying why are some students going to school for 4 hours?
Right. The shift system, those of you that don't know, the shift system is being, I don't know if you have it in your countries. We have a shortage of physical space for the number of students that we need to serve. So some schools in the 1970s were put on shift, meaning they operate 2 shifts. So there's one principal for one shift, there's one principal for the second shift in some cases, and there's 1,000 students on each shift, and one set comes in the morning from 8 to 12, and off they go. God knows where they go. And then the next shift comes in from 1 to 5 or whatever it is, 1 to 6, and that's the shift. Other schools, the high school that I went to ran on a shift too, but it's done differently. So the first shift starts at 8, and the second shift starts at 9:10, and so the first shift ends at 1:50 or 2 o'clock, and the second shift ends at 3 o'clock. So the students are overlapping, but there's 2 shifts. But it's different than the other ship system. It's not the real ship system. But the fact is that when the students leave school at 12, they have 5 hours of daylight. What are they doing? And when they don't come at 8, what are they doing? Where are they? And there are higher levels of violence in the ship system schools. It has been reported. So there's an attempt to take Jamaica off ship, but that requires building more high schools and that staffing them, and that requires money that the government does not currently have. So that's part of the challenge. Do you have ship systems in your countries? No, you have a smaller population.
Yes, we have them.
You have them in St. Lucia? In St. Lucia you have them?
Yeah, I must because I'm flying at the secondary school.
Does your ship system, St. Lucia? St. Lucia, does your system work the same way?
Yes, it was from 810 and was to 505.
Do you have the same issue of more violence in those schools?
Well, I keep trying to misbehave a lot more.
The what, sorry?
They tend to misbehave a lot more.
They tend to misbehave. And the reason that you have them is the same that we have, that you have a space constraint and you have and that's why.
Well, it's a space constraint because one of the secondary schools got damaged by a fire.
Oh.
So 2 schools are presently sharing the space.
Oh, so but that will be resolved.
Yes, it will be resolved.
Right, whereas ours doesn't have a resolution. Ours doesn't have a resolution anytime soon. We need to raise money to build the school. Let's take a break. It's 5:45, I think. 10 minutes.
Well, what's the
How much is going to cost? Not to do
It might have been expedited.
What's your tax No, we are paid.
Oh dear. Just prepare, just prepare.
Courtney, you had raised your hand, I forgot to call on you.
That's fine. Yeah, I was just trying to get into the conversation, but
Open with you get into the conversation, right?
it's no biggie. I guess it would just be reiterating the point that that's interesting.
Oh, this is so cool. I just had a friend that posted on Facebook a post that says, I am in preschool. I was not built to sit still, keep my hands to myself, take turns, be patient, stand in line, or keep quiet all of the time. I need motion, novelty, adventure, and engage the world with my whole body. Let me play, trust me, and learn.
That's great. You happen to have any of your markers?
I knew that in my bag, which I left in my mom's house. There's not up there.
There's a marker.
There's anyone up there?
There's one up there.
No, there's anyone.
One right there.
Okay. Thank you.
I was just going to ask you what else is left. I'm looking at it like, I don't know what's happening. Are we doing the Harvard Fine case study thing? Well, we haven't done group work in a while. Is there anything that you can give us to individually that we're not all doing the same thing? Unfortunately for you, Doc, this is you're still teaching,
I'm rather celebratory mood today. Last day today, I'm going to go home and do a dance. Oh my parents don't understand. They're so excited. I spent all you don't seem to understand. It's been 3 months of torture. When did you start having the second service almost as long as the first term? Driving me crazy.
No, because you're thinking of your lecture. I don't have to do this one. You still have to do this. You have to do the presentation. You still have to do you say you want to get into marriage? No, I don't like that. Yes, they're adults.
That you get it.
Everything has their pros and their cons.
I was just going to say it has to be everywhere in the world you find it. Because if I think about teaching other than the economy now, but you're so good, the children are going to get us this children's and then everything has their pros.
Primary have pros and cons. Secondary have pros and cons.
Happy World Alterna.
There are two other students that were stuck in Portland because of the rain.
Oh, Sonia. What's she on? Hi. Has she been hearing? I didn't know she's talking. What, mute the mic? Can I type to?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I didn't know you were there, Sonia.
I have been here, Dorma, and I am here.
We didn't know that. Craig is just telling us. Where are you?
I am in my office.
But that's good. Can she participate like that normally?
And I'm seeing Vernon saying hello to me now.
Wow. Hi, Vernon. I haven't even said hello to Vernon. I hope he's been able to listen.
Yes, I noticed. I was even texting Craig to say, Craig, I cannot participate in the class. Why is that?
Oh, well, I didn't even know you were there. Can she participate? Yeah, so when we come back now, if you can speak so they can hear you, then you can, hi Dorma, you can participate.
Right, I was just about to call Dorma to say something to her. Dorma?
Where is she?
She's at home too.
That's funny. Huh?
It's too much rain in Portland to come.
That's okay. That's okay. All right, well, we're going to start back now. Vernon is off.
Okay.
Vernon is off. That means he's off.
Dorma, look at me. I'm texting you. I'm texting you. I'm talking to you on the messenger, so you don't have to.
Okay, good to know.
All right, miss.
Okay.
Western campus is having all sorts of papers.
You heard Dorma?
Everything is trying to link and have some time to slide up.
Okay. Everybody's back.
Western campus is having all sorts of papers.
You heard that, right? Why always have to say that? All right, we're going to start back. The last part of the class now. I'm going to introduce the case studies that each of you are going to receive. You're going to get two, so you'll just divide yourself up into two groups. Bermuda, you'll get one. Dominica, you'll get one. And Jamaica will probably get two. Kingston. Montego Bay, if they join us, will get one. The issues are, the cases, will be presented by each of the groups. I will email out the cases and the links tomorrow. The cases deal with sensitive issues in the classroom. So you heard Alyssa talking about issues, challenges she has with some students who might not be engaged. So some of the reasons for that could be that they're bored. It could be that they don't like the teacher. It could be that they're not feeling well. It could be that they're hungry. It could be that they have special needs that have gone unidentified. What are some other issues that they might have that might cause them to, they might not understand, or they might have other things on their mind. They might be going through puberty and they might be more interested in the opposite sex, and then in what's going on. They might have issues at home that are distracting them. They might be being bullied, and so they're not able to focus because they're scared. They might have been labeled one way or the other that has caused them to feel ashamed or insecure. So there are different issues that might happen in the classroom, and the teacher wouldn't necessarily know unless there's some fight or there's some way that the student can communicate that to the teacher. So there's both overt ways of you knowing, like some dramatic incident in the classroom, and then there's covert ways between relationships between you and the student. So these case studies, they give one particular issue. It could be a child with special needs and different ways that the child might need to be worked with or served. It might be a child who's being picked on because he's from a different ethnic background, and so he's having trouble communicating. It might be that the school board is recommending that they have to, the teacher has to teach to certain tests to pass certain standards, and the teacher doesn't want to do that, and the parents are having issues with the test as well. It might be a child who is being bullied. There are various ones. I can't remember which ones I'm going to give you. It might be that the teachers are teaching in a school where the children come, like Mrs. G, where they come from different ethnic backgrounds than she does, and they're having trouble gaining respect and being able to connect. The one I'm going to model for you today, and this is what I would want you to do. So on the date of April 22nd is when you're going to present. Each group will present. As I said before, Bermuda will be one group because it's only like 5 or 6 of you. Then Lucia will be one group. It's only 3 or 4 or 5. I don't know, 3 or 4 of you. I mean, Dominica. St. Lucia, you're going to have to divide yourself into 2 groups, which I trust you can do on your own. Jamaica, you're going to divide, Kingston, you're going to divide yourself into 2 groups on your own. Let me take that back. I will divide you by your last names or something so that I send the links and it's very clear to everybody who's reading what. So I take that back. Erase what I just said in your minds. I will put you in your groups. Okay? And you will get a little bit of time in the beginning of that class to sit and talk with each other about how you're going to present it. So what you'd have to do, you would have had to have read the case before the class. That's all the reading for the class. And when you present it, you're going to talk to each other about how you're going to share this presentation. You're going to have only a few people speak about the case and maybe 1 or 2 people facilitate discussions. That's up to you all. Some of the cases come with questions at the back, such as the one that I'm going to model for you now. Some of them don't. If they come with questions at the back, you have to add at least 1 or 2 questions of your own. If they don't come with questions at the back, then you have to make up questions. There are no right answers to the questions. The questions simply want to show 2 things. 1, that the people you're presenting to have listened to the issues in the case, and 2, that they've thought about the issues in whatever answers they're giving. It will all become clear when I model this now, right? So this case is called A Special Education Plan for Annabella. Does supporting her needs mean holding her back? That's the title of the case. The main characters are Annabella, her classroom teacher, the school's resource room teacher, because this particular school actually has a resource room, and her mother. Who is Annabella? Annabella is a 2nd grade child who is Mexican American, but whose first language is not Spanish, even though she has a Spanish name. She has just switched schools because her parents moved from one part of the community to another. In her 1st grade classroom, she was assessed by her teacher as having challenges with reading and with speaking and with writing, and she was referred for an assessment. The assessment never happened because the teacher never followed up, and the child continued to have challenges. She was transferred to 2nd grade in a new school. When she transferred school, she went into 2nd grade, and that teacher, whose name is Jean, or Mrs. Harfleur, she picked up that Annabella was having trouble. And so they finally did the assessment that needed to be done, and they found out that she needed to go to the resource room, and so she now goes to the resource room 2 or 3 times a week, and she's improving, but she's not improving at the rate the teacher would like. It's coming to the end of the year, and while the parents were very involved, the mother particularly, not the father is ill, and so he doesn't come to school very often. It's only the mother. While the mother was very involved at the beginning with getting her assessed, settling her into the new school, and signing off on her individual education plan, or her IEP, which is something, that's what they call in the U.S. school system. When you have special needs students that are in a mainstream class that go to resource room, they have a plan that's worked out. The parent has to sign off on it. The teacher has to sign off on it. The resource room teacher has to sign off on it. So this was all done, and once that took place, the mother said, "Oh, I can breathe a sigh of relief now. Everything is going to be okay. There's a plan in place for Annabella, and she's going to be able to progress." It's not like the old school where it seemed that a lot of the students were Spanish-speaking natives, and so the teacher would teach in Spanish, not in English. So it was really hard for Annabella because she doesn't speak Spanish, but they just assumed she spoke Spanish because of her name. So everything is okay now. So the mother has not been as visible at the school in the last 2 terms, and the teacher doesn't really know the mother. So the issues are, Annabella's in 2nd grade, and she's getting ready to move to 3rd grade, and her classroom teacher, is not so sure she should move up. She's thinking she should stay back, but she's not certain how she's going to communicate that to the mother. The mother didn't want to have her held back when she was in 1st grade in the previous school. She made that very clear. You can read from the case. So, from the mother's perspective, you hear her say, "I'm so relieved. I can stop fighting. The resource room is giving Annabella what she needs. I'm taking a break now. I know she has a learning disability and she may depend on the teachers too much. I know she can do that because at home she's like that too. She's my baby. She's my youngest child. I know I spoil her. But I know the school will sort it out." And the teacher says, "The delay in special education placement at her last school put Annabella in a tough spot. She has adapted well to her new school and her behavior is not a big problem. These are things that bode well for 3rd grade. But she's also immature and easily distracted. She gets out of her seat often and she's constantly asking for help. She needs more individual time than I can offer, and this is going to be a problem in 3rd grade." The resource room teacher says, "I try to share goals and progress regularly with the family, but I want them to be more involved. They're not helping her with her homework. They're not helping her to meet her individual education plan goals. I don't know her parents that well, but I do know that they've had stressful issues in their family with the father's health recently, and both are working. At the last meeting, both of them made it clear how unhappy they were with her previous school, and they made it clear that they had concerns about her being retained, that it stressed them out. Annabella's view is, I know I'm good at thinking even when it's hard for me to read. My teacher says to use my thinking to help me read. She says you just have to believe in yourself. I'm not so good at writing, but I'm good at jumping rope. Mrs. Harper, my classroom teacher, helps me too. She's nice and she never yells. I can read my sentences now and all my number words. But I don't like it, math and writing. Ugh. I do like when we get to sing in math though. And when I grow up, I want to be one of those singers that can dance too. The case ends with the classroom teacher sitting at her desk saying, knowing that it's her responsibility to make retention recommendations to the principal shortly before the close of the school year, and she's getting ahead. I normally defer to the resource room teacher in cases like this, and she's recommending retention. But I'm still not sure. I really have to make a strong case for retention to the principal, and I know the parents are going to resist it. Who knows how they will respond? How am I going to put all these pieces together? That's the case. That's all I'm asking you to do. Does that seem difficult? No. Why am I said that's an example of a presentation. What did that take? Like 5-10 minutes? Is that even 10 minutes? 8 minutes, maybe? So you have like an 8-minute presentation. Some of the cases are longer than this. This one is quite short. And then you pick a few questions for discussion. Why am I using these cases? These cases are written by a research arm at the Ed School at Harvard University, and they're written to bring up issues that teachers have to face that aren't necessarily linked to actual teaching of the content, but that can affect their teaching. So you heard the teacher say she's easily distracted, She's always asking for help. She needs more individual attention than I can give her. And this is a child with special needs that's mainstreamed into my classroom. She says here before that she doesn't have any particular special needs education training. So it's good that she goes to the resource room, but she still spends the majority of the time in my classroom. And I'm not helping her get up to speed. She came in behind, she's still behind. So one of the questions is, how can parents make a difference in the referral process, meaning in the retention process, or whatever the school decides to do? What role can the parents play? That's one of the questions. Answer the question. I need an answer to that question. What role could the parents play in this?
Communicate more.
Communicate
more with the teacher on a regular basis.
But how could the teacher get the parents to do that?
I think to WhatsApp.
Yeah, then she's saying that's cute. Add them to WhatsApp.
Have a notebook in the child's bag that they always write. So that at least
the WhatsApp thing is not a joke. They couldn't No, that's true. You're saying make them feel comfortable enough to continue communicating. In this case, it doesn't sound like the parent is uncomfortable. It just sounds like she's stressed between her husband being sick. She has more than one child, and she's working. So she can't. The grandfather that always walks Annabelle to school. So she doesn't on a regular basis. It's not like the teacher comes to her on Saturday morning and says something to her, but she's not there. So there you're saying you can create a notebook that the parent knows is coming home that she must write in and you must write in. That might even be part of the IEP, and she's not doing it. Yeah, she's not doing it.
And it may not be something that's wrong, it might be just to let you know we did so and so, she did a great job on whatever.
Right. So you have to explain that to her. So one of the answers to that question is to find ways to communicate, better communication, open communication lines with the parent. All right. Another question is, how do the teachers and the parents' view of Annabella affect their decision making? So that means you have to have been listening to be able to tell me now what's the mother's view of her daughter? What did she say about her daughter? She said she was spoiled. She said she asks for help a lot. She said she's always coming to me to do things. She likes to read, but mostly by her mother, when she's reading with her mother as opposed to on her own. So she's a needy child. She needs attention. Okay? So that might affect how they decide whether she should go up to the next class or stay back. The teachers see her as being in need. And it's a very tricky thing to communicate to a parent. Parents don't normally take too kindly when you tell them that their child has to stay back, as one can imagine. Have any of you ever said that to a student?
No, I know special needs students, they always go on. That's part of it, that they always go on. But I think in that situation, if the family don't have any time, the family don't have any time to help with homework, in that way, the teacher could see the recommend the family getting an extra tutor, or they call it the brother, big sister, help from school, or hire a child from a higher grade.
Yes, that's a good idea. Yes?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. That's a good idea. That's creative thinking, yes?
Yeah. The extra tutor, big brother, big sister come and tutor the child. And the teacher should wait until school late and say, okay, she have to be there back. She should have picked up early on, and because from you creative goal, the IEP is supposed to have 4 sections, and at the end of the year, it's supposed to be.
Right, and the thing is, the case is saying that the child is making progress with her IEP, but it's not the level of progress that they want to have made, and so she's still not where she needs to be socially and academically to move up to 3rd grade. So I had that example in my children's school where there was a child who was put in this class because of his birthday, whatever his birthday was, right beside the cutoff for the age group in the year. But you could see that the child was not ready, that he couldn't sit for the same amount of time that the other children sat. He wouldn't do as well academically. He struggled to make friends. He just wasn't ready. And the school said to the parents, you know, we think this is in grade 1 or kindergarten. We think it would be important for you to consider letting the child stay and repeat the year. And the parents said, no. We'll take him to another school. So if he's going to repeat the year, he'll do it in a different school where he's not with the other children that he knows. That's one parent's reaction. Another parent set of parents, a similar case, said, okay, we'll let him repeat. And he did repeat. And and the child is still at the school, and now he's one of the top performers in his class. Because instead of being the youngest in his class, he's now among the oldest in his class. And he's more secure, he's more confident, and he's learning at the pace that is better for him. So in that case, the school made a good move, and the parents made a good move for that child. But remember, the parents also have to have a say. So when the parents said to the school, well, we'll just move the child, that wasn't what the school was asking, but that was the end result. I don't know what happened to that child in particular. But that's an example of a situation where, as a teacher, you don't always think about what you have to do. In our case, it's not you don't even often have that option because you can't keep them back, because there's no space to keep them back.
I think sometimes parents might be against it because sometimes there's a stigma.
Right, that's why they don't move the child.
But I remember in grade 10, there was a student in my class. She had repeated, it was her second year grade 10, and she felt uncomfortable the whole time. And everything in class was praying and saying, shh, I should repeat. And so I can imagine parents.
It gets harder as a child gets older.
Yeah.
Right? So in kindergarten, it's not so bad. But if it's in high school, it's a problem.
Yeah.
And the special needs issue is complex because really in many teacher training programs, they're not really taught. You're not really taught how to. In some cases, you might have shadows in the classroom with you. There's another person in the classroom, but that shadow is really only there to help that particular student. That's not an extra person in the classroom to help the teacher.
No.
Why are you nodding your head over there?
Oh, this is our life.
Well, tell us what you mean. This is your life.
We are both parents of special needs boys, so we are completely aware. My son is in a school where right now there are 10 students, and there is the teacher, and there are about another 5 grown-ups in the room, but the room is made for 10 students. And, and that's because everybody's at different levels. So you have those who are verbal, you have those like my son who only speak when you force them to after he's cussed everybody and their mother. And then he may speak the word out at you. You have those who struggle with the subject material. So numbers are a problem, or words are a problem, or fine motor skills are a problem. And then you have those who genuinely may have struggled when they were younger, but really it is just their age, where they're in that, they have issues, as you said, sitting still, which, as Sir Ken Robinson has pointed out, is not always solved with medication.
No, right.
So, yeah, that's a big
thing. As you said, because I have a cousin with the same issue, and he's 8 years old, and as you said, it's a case where if you're not trained for the special needs, you're not going to really know what's necessary and what to do. Because that little cousin of mine, he's 8 years old, and we have a trampoline where I cannot jump on that for 5 minutes. And I timed him one day, and he was on it constantly for 20 minutes. And I was like, he is super fit. And you know what I realized? With him, like, what we try, he loves the idea of space and astronomy. So we get some more placemats with all those stuff, and he'll do his little multiplication, try to do. So we try to ride and whistle at times with him. If we're cooking, we try to say, okay, come, get your multiplication, and you try to ride and whistle with him. And there are things that you will see he memorizes, and you're wondering how he remembers those things. I remember my dad seeing him one day. My dad is not very small, and he just one day he was just there, and he just said to my dad, "Uncle, are you pregnant?" My father is very small, as I said, so he's not very small. And he just went, "Uncle," blatantly in front of you, are you pregnant? My father is like, "No, maybe not yet." I just understand.
Right, you see, you just never know what you're going to say, and if you react, you have to be tempered in your reaction.
Yeah, they don't have
They don't feel the filter.
It's like for special needs, persons who are trained, so you're not going to know how to.
Right. So that's an example of one case, and that's an example of a short discussion. I'm going to do one other case that is the same issue. This is the case of a child being possibly retained, but not for special needs, not because of special needs. So in this case, it's about a little boy. His name is Tim, and the case is called Tim Kelly, a school response to a family in need. So right away, the title is giving you an idea of what the case is about. The school is responding, not the teacher, but the school. Okay? So,
people know how private conversations because I'm so profound this is like big conversation. And you can get to them how to private conversation.
No private conversation. Okay, we'll try. Thank you. Can you move?
Sometimes we're talking with other conversations.
Right. Okay. So this is the last case for today. It's about a little boy named Tim, and it's called A School Response to a Family in Need. It begins with a little background where you get to get a sense of the character of the boy. So it tells you that he runs in, he's on the school bus, he has an angry outburst on the school bus, but when he gets to his classroom, he runs up to his teacher and he gives her a hug, and she returns it enthusiastically. He's in second grade, but she notices that Tim looks quite disheveled. His hair isn't combed, he's wearing a dirty t-shirt, he looks like he may not have bathed properly. But so she gently suggests that he go wash his hands and face in the bathroom, in the school's bathroom, and come back. When he comes back, he sits down at his desk and he eats up the snack that the teacher has put there. But she guesses, he has not had breakfast, so she puts the snack there. Okay, then he opens up his backpack and he gives her his homework, and the teacher is thinking, okay, and she looks at it, and she says to herself, Tim is very sweet and she's very fond of him. He's been in her class for 2 years. It's a multi-grade classroom. He's a wonderful child. He's thoughtful, but he's still struggling with math, and I think there are other issues that are holding him back. So you get the case presents each character and gets you into the mind of the character. So they're very easy to read. So the teacher goes on to say, the problem is that he comes to school unprepared both academically and socially. Often his homework is missing. Sometimes it's destroyed. He's not clean. He wears the same clothes over and over again, and he has problems managing his anger. I just don't think he's getting enough supervision at home. This is the teacher's voice. Then it gets to tell you the child's home life. He lives at home with his brothers and sisters and his mother. There's no father. The mother works a late shift, so she's usually sleeping when the kids leave for school. The teacher's guessing he doesn't have a regular bedtime. He gets himself up in the morning. He fixes his own breakfast. He gets himself dressed. And he goes off to school without seeing his mother, so there's no contact, which is why when he comes into the class, he hugs the teacher. She says she's noticed recently he's had a lot more problems managing his anger, and he's had to work with the school guidance counselor. The mother says, in a perfect world, this is the mother, we'd have a lot of money, and I could stay home, and I'd be there all the time for my kids. We'd go take field trips, we'd go out to the park, we'd go to the playground, we'd eat dinner together, we could read a book before bed. But I have to work at nights. There's nothing I can do. It's the only job I have. That's the mother's perspective. I think it's a good sign that I'm not hearing too much from the school now, she says. Just because I'm not getting phone calls about Tim acting up on the bus, maybe that means he's getting better. If I don't call them and they don't call me, that's a good thing, the mother's saying, right? Now you hear from the guidance counselor. The guidance counselor says, I've known the family for a long time. 10 years ago, I was the one who counseled the family when the father became violent towards family members. So this is a child who's a product of an abusive home, it tells you. I know that Tim's mother is not comfortable coming to the school. I know that she doesn't have the time, that she works at night, and she isn't able to do the things she'd like to do. But I also know that Tim's behavior problems have been escalating, and I can't get the mother on the phone. The mother says, I'd much prefer to speak to the guidance counselor than the teacher, because the guidance counselor is easier to talk to. but I really don't have anything to say because I can't change the way we're living. I can't get a different job. This is what it is. I really wish I could change my shift at work, even if it means taking a cut in pay, because I need to do this. I know I need to do this. And then it goes from the mother to the principal. And the principal is saying, I was really sad when the teacher mentioned her concern that Tim might not be ready to go to 3rd grade. I liked him, and I know he's having problems on the school bus and in the playground because I have to get involved with the disciplinary problems that he faces. The good thing is we're a small school with a close and experienced staff, so we can give students the kind of individual attention some of them need. So when I think about the struggles that families like Tim's face, it has many implications for how we have to change our role as educators in our students' lives. A lot of the parents at our school have struggled to get food on the table, meet their rent payments, and take care of basics like heat and light. More and more of these kids are needing extra support from the school because their parents are so stressed out with work and with finances. Now it ends with the teacher. Everyone at the school wants to help him. They've tried to help him. I know I do. I've been giving him food. I try to get him to clean himself up so he doesn't smell in front of the other children and they don't make fun of him. I try to encourage him to do his work. I try to help him do his work. But I'm not getting anywhere with the mother. I've left that to the guidance counselor, and the communication still seems very limited. I don't think she's telling me a lot when we do talk about what's actually going on in Tim's life, and she's very private. And even though I've been flexible about scheduling meetings, she still doesn't come, and she doesn't return phone calls. Now the principal is contacting me, the teacher says, and I have to be really clear about my assessment of Tim and his family issues. I know the principal also knows the family well because Tim's brothers and sisters have come to the school. And I have to come up with some ideas for how to move beyond this communication challenge I have with the mother so she too can be included in this discussion and in the decision that we have to make. That's the end of the thing. So the question again is, what is this teacher going to do? What solutions might there be that could be suggested to the family? Ashley.
Well, I guess the teacher could do is to have the homework in her classroom before the meeting.
Okay, so one solution being offered is the teacher could adapt her schedule to encourage the child to do homework at school so that she knows it gets done. She can see where he's having trouble. And that obviously calls for an adjustment on the teacher's own schedule. So she has to be willing to do that. Maybe there's a homework club at school that Tim could join, which wouldn't be that teacher, but there's another homework teacher. That's one option, right? What about the problems Tim faces in the mornings with the breakfast and the dirtiness and all of that?
Maybe there could be some sort of etiquette/routine lesson or series of lessons that is introduced either school-wide or on a per-class.
So it's not done targeting Tim alone, right? Yeah,
you're
that's
talking
right.
about, okay, boys and girls, we're getting older and these are, so everybody gets a chart they have to tick off because she can't be in the home physically making a chart for Tim to tick off. Just so he knows what he did this, I did this.
Right, because some of the anger issues is that
say we did these things.
Yeah. So some of the anger issues with Tim could be that kids are making fun of him, and this is how he's reacting on the bus or when he gets to school. So how do you work with Tim and his anger issues? One way might be to do that and help him and encourage other children. So and see if that makes the acting out lessen or disappear. If that doesn't happen, then the anger issues are related to something else, right? And that something else could be what? That he's unhappy that he doesn't get to see his mother.
Could be.
Right?
There's no mention of
an issue with the mother.
Could be. Actually,
there's no mention of the guidance counselor meeting with the child one-on-one. I don't know.
Check that. So the question she's asked, is there any mention of the guidance counselor meeting one-on-one with the child? Right, they're calling the parents, but the parents are not answering the call. So another option is to go and visit the mother.
Visit all official looking letter. People always get very nervous when they get that official looking letter.
And in fact,
you must show up
And in fact, that's what happens. In the end, this one actually has an epilogue. Some of the cases don't have that. And in that, the guidance counselor does write a letter to the mother, an official letter. And the mother gets really upset, right? Obviously. Very good. And that's what she does. But she gets very upset and she refuses all communication for a while. But then eventually, she realizes that the guidance counselor was simply saying things she herself knew but didn't want to admit. And she takes the letter to her boss, and wherever she works, in the factory that she's working in. And what do you think happens? What do you think happens when she takes the letter to her boss? She changes the shifts, that's right. So she takes a letter to her boss and she says, this is what's happening with my family. I really need some consideration. I've been working here for however many years. And the boss agrees and she changes the shifts. And so what does that mean? She's now working days and it's been a hard adjustment, but she's done it. And now Tim, according to the teacher, is showing a lot of improvement both behaviorally and in terms of paying attention, so that she's hoping she'll be able to promote him to the 3rd grade after all. So in that case, there's an answer to a lot of the questions. That you're right, the official looking letter was scary enough to jolt the mother and make her have to acknowledge what was going on. And the family case was sorted out, which then helped the students in class. So now Tim would be paying attention and be interested in what's happening. So these are the kinds of things that happen when you have to strengthen the family link, the link between home and school, which you often don't learn about. I mean, there's no course entitled, that I know of, there should be, at least in this program there isn't one, entitled Creating Links Between Home and School. A lot of that is common sense, right? So Delia says, oh, you can WhatsApp them. Some schools are using that, the phone, and they have parents on a text plan and they text the parents. Some schools use the internet and they send, or they have Facebook pages and they use the internet and send homework and connect with parents that way. Because not all parents will come to parent-teacher meetings, or they'll visit the parents in their homes and go door to door so that they can meet the parents and also see the home, because when you see the home, you get a sense of where the child is coming from. But you don't want to let that bias you of how you interact with the child. It's a fine line. Right? So we know from research around the world that the more involved the parents are proactively in the school, the stronger the school performs, the stronger the students perform in the school. It often seems to be a challenge to get parents to participate, probably because they're usually working when school is going on. So then the school has to create activities that the parents can participate, family activities, family games nights, family cleanup days, that bring the parents to school, so that the children don't only see parents coming to school because they're in trouble. If the parents only come to school when there's someone, then the child only ever thinks that they come when they're in trouble. That's a negative thought. And also, sometimes the children are really happy to see the parents, and the other children notice whose parents come and whose parents don't come. Hold on, Dina. So the teacher has to have an ability to have an open line of communication with the parents. And it's not easy because some parents are very demanding. And some parents try to take all the teacher's attention. And the teacher has to remain neutral. And so really teachers have to be pretty good diplomats. And that's another skill that you have to develop over time. Does anybody have any comments to that?
Just as a thought, sometimes teachers only call parents when they're reaching that you can get over with you. They will reach out without support. Then form a better relationship with the teacher and better communication, better bridge. Just call them and let them know how the child is, what he is, and all of that. So when they need to be home, so much that they can grow.
Yeah, the thing is that's an extra added activity for the teacher to do. And if the teacher has 40 children, you can in the class, you can imagine how the teacher has to stagger that. I mean, that's an extra added cost to their time. So they have to be able to manage it effectively. But But I agree with you. I would love to receive a call from my child's teacher telling me my son or my daughter did something wonderful. You know, I really would. Or when I go to drop them, to hear that from the teacher. But in the day-to-day business of running the classes and so on, everybody's so busy, that doesn't always happen. But the point that we're making is that sometimes that little extra effort goes a really long way. And learning to strengthen the link between home and school is very important in building an academic and social development, a strong academic and social development base to teaching the whole child, so to speak. Do you, Sonia, Dorma, anybody have anything they want to say? People remotely calling in. Or Verna? No? Okay. Okay, just checking. When she speaks, you tell me. All right, so this is an example of the cases. I will email each of you, well, I'll email the whole group, but I'll just tell you who's in which group and what gets what case. If you have trouble opening the cases, you tell me and I'll give you a different one. Yes,
adding to what you said initially, earlier, I saw where a school, you know, they had a little, of course they had their own sports day, but they had a little sports day for the kids and parents and a few, like, you know, other like siblings, other relatives and family. And, you know, a mother showed up and, like, you know, a sister showed up and they had their little running and there is, you know, and I'm saying that helps. That helps too, you know. And like with their career day, they had the career day. And, so those things, they're different ways. There are different ways to involve parents. Some schools have what's called a parent skill bank, where they find out what skill sets the parents have. So some parents might be electricians or plumbers or architects or, I don't know, there's a range of jobs that people have. And they make a list of that. And then when things happen at the school, they call on that parent to assist. And usually the parent is willing to try and help. Or they'll hire the parent instead of an outside person. That's one thing. Or they'll know what the jobs are and they will have career days and bring the parents in. And students are always really happy to see their parent come in to talk on a career day. You know, that's a big self-esteem builder. So there are creative ways. Obviously, there's the PTA, but not every parent will join the PTA. And in many cases, the PTA is all about fundraising. But some PTAs will do sessions for parents where they'll bring in speakers and try to get parents to work with each other and share best practices, things that have worked for them, so they can learn from each other. And create a community. It's all about the community. So that case was interesting to me because the title said how the school helped the boy. It wasn't just the teacher. It wasn't just the guidance counselor. It was everybody working together to try and figure out what they could do about this one child who was a member of the community. Sonia?
No, I was just saying, yes, I agree with you totally. I was just trying to find the connection. I'm agreeing with you totally because it does help to build a skill bank. And in our context, for example, where resources are not so plentiful, when you have that collaboration between school and community, for example, you have the business sector coming on board, you could ask for sponsorship for whatever projects you're working on, because we do that a lot here. And so that would also factor in. And the Alumni Association also is part of the whole community of school.
Right. Yeah. Some schools have active alumni and some don't. But
right. Like, you know, look at Jamaica College, for example.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great example. Jamaica College has such an active alumni community that they're basically rebuilding the school. All the classrooms and auditoriums and all the football fields and everything.
And it also helps to build on their earning or their business enterprises, because they have an auditorium now and they rent for big functions and all of that. So it does help.
Yeah, they do. They do. So they're very involved. So I just want to close today by going over what's going to happen next week. So as I said, Dr. Mundell is going to be here. The articles are here for you to read. I won't be here the 8th, but I'll be here the 15th. Again, in the revised lecture schedule that I sent you, the articles are listed with the websites. The websites will take you to articles from mainstream magazines. These are the ones about Teach for America and KIPP Academy and so on. Some of them will have embedded in the article something to click and listen to, a little short video. Please watch those. Okay.
Oh. Now, I was just saying, Miss, the video you sent about Miss Pearson,
yeah.
She has tons of videos on there. The one about school begins at 8 is a very good one where she used psychology on the parents.
Oh, maybe I'll show that one. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Sonia. So that's it. And then the next time you'll see me will be April 15th. And we'll go over motivation in the classroom and some examples of ed reform. You've already heard me talk about them. That's namely Teach for America and the KIPP Academy movement, which is a charter school. KIPP academies are types of charter schools. So that's it. If there aren't any questions, the papers will be returned. I may be able to get them to Dr. Mundell to give to you guys. And then you guys and the other islands, you'll get them by email. All right, so thank you very much. Have a happy Easter. Celebrate it when it comes. Yes, Jason.
Regarding the classroom comparison of paper, is that 1 to 3 pages or 3 to 5 pages?
I think in the assignment I said 1 to 3 pages, didn't I?
You don't say 3 to 5.
Yeah. 3 to 5? Did I say 3 to 5? I think so, yeah. 3 to 5 pages. Okay, 3 to 5 pages, whatever I said. What? I can't have Jason. 3 to 5. All right, so Jason, then just write 3 pages then. If you have an issue with the number. Yeah. No. Yes.
The exam that we have.
You know what I mean? So what I'm going to do is ask you to get So you have the essay.
Yes.
What's going on here?